Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send our way, articles, research papers, your notes, sometimes, honestly, just these really weird fragments of info, and we try to unpack them, explore the fascinating insights hidden inside.
Exactly. Our goal is really to help you piece together the puzzle, find the connections, make some sense out of all the complexity and the materials you've gathered for us.
And today, wow, the stack of sources you've sent is, well, frankly, it's one of the wildest collections we've ever tackled. We're diving into this whole world centered around a German hip-hop group called Doza Me Siru Dali.
Yeah, the material is eclectic, to say the least. We've got YouTube transcripts, it looks like, where the crew themselves are talking about their own work.
Right, and then that's mixed with analyses of their music, deep dives into specific songs, notes on stuff they never finished, and then it gets weird.
Hmm.
Documents that seem to describe, like, actual real-world events or
Things
individuals.
that look like logbooks, yeah.
Yeah.
Investigation reports, even what look like personal messages. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
So this isn't just your typical music deep dive, is it? The material pretty quickly pushes us way beyond just analyzing, sound and lyrics.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like it's unveiling this really complex and honestly, often pretty unsettling universe. One that seems to deliberately blur the lines between, say, creative work, digital spaces, and, well, things that might actually be happening in the real world.
Exactly. It feels less like we're studying an artist and more like we've just fallen down a very, very strange rabbit hole. So our mission today, listener, is to be your guides, try to navigate this maze with you.
We're going to try and piece together the key bits from all these fragmented sources, understand the unique world Dozer Cruz seems to be presenting or maybe even living in.
And see what surprising connections and, yeah, let's be honest, unsettling themes pop up when you actually lay it all out together.
It's definitely a challenge. The sources themselves are kind of as unconventional and fragmented as the subject matter seems to be.
Yeah.
It's going to take some careful navigation, I think, and maybe just being okay with some ambiguity.
Okay, then. Let's unpack this stack and dive deep into the world of Doza Crew. All right, so let's start with the core. Doza Crew. German hip-hop. But like immediately looking through these sources, it's crystal clear they don't really fit the usual mold for that genre.
Not at all. When you start looking at analyses of their sound, you see descriptions like, it doesn't just bend genres, it ignores them entirely. One force actually called it genre obliterated.
Genre obliterating.
Right.
Wow.
They're pulling in stuff you just wouldn't expect together,
Yeah.
like metal riffs crashing into soak melodies, pop hooks getting twisted up with industrial noise, electronic textures layered over classic hip-hop beats.
It sounds less like a blend and more like a collision almost.
That's a good way to put it, a collision. And it feels really intentional. Several sources pointed out that the sound itself seems designed to be, well, unsettling.
Yeah, you hear about dissonance, right? And weird time signatures, unexpected rhythm shifts. It creates this feeling of friction, like things aren't quite lining up properly.
And that friction, that sort of off-kilter feeling, seems directly tied to this idea they have of an alien identity. They talk about themselves like outsiders, making music that's on a totally different wavelength.
Oh, it's not supposed to fit neatly into a box.
Exactly. That unsettling quality isn't a mistake. It's kind of their signature sound. It's like a sonic way of saying, we're other, we operate outside the norm.
Okay, so the sound is alien disruptive, and the lyrical themes. Looking through things like the crew lore discussions or transcripts from tracks like Uger Streifzug, they are just consistently heavy, dark.
Relentlessly so, yeah. Apocalyptic vibes, societal collapse, zombies, dystopia. It's this recurring landscape they paint.
And the imagery they use is incredibly potent, isn't it? Really visceral. Like in the Ueger Streifzug transcript, you get lines about an endless zombie march through empty city streets.
Or other documents talking about Schattenwesens, shadow beings with scratching claws, hungry, merciless. It creates this really bleak, almost tangible picture of decay and menace.
You really feel that dread just reading the descriptions. But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit confusing at first. These super bleak, dark, often disturbing lyrics, they get paired with beats that, according to some analyses, can be surprisingly energetic, sometimes even kitschy.
Or they have this driving, propulsive rhythm. Yeah, like in Jorger Streifzug.
That contrast, that juxtaposition, it seems absolutely crucial to understanding them, doesn't it?
Totally. It's not just about wallowing in despair. The sources suggest this contrast is key to exploring. Like, how do you actually cope when everything feels so dark? How do you find any energy or meaning or even just moments of weird beauty when the world feels like it's crumbling.
So the music itself, the energetic beats, it's like a lifeline within that bleakness.
Kind of a paradoxical lifeline, yeah,
Yeah.
in this grim reality they describe.
Okay, and the zombies you mentioned, they don't feel like cheap horror movie stuff just for shock value, do they? Reading these sources, they feel deeply metaphorical.
Oh, completely. The discussions in crew lore and analyses like Ewig or Streifzug really point to them symbolizing a kind of sickness within society, like spreading fear, paranoia, maybe a loss of empathy that just wrecks genuine human connection.
And the idea of infecting, especially thinking about the German word maybe, it feels like it's talking about a corruption spreading from the inside out, not just like a biological thing.
Right. These zombies represent what humanity could become if chaos takes over and we lose those essential qualities. It's a terrifying potential future.
So it's a metaphor for societal breakdown, losing your humanity. And that theme of fractured connection seems really strong too, right? Feeling alone, even in a crowd, communication just breaking down.
Yeah, that sense of humanity being lost. One source even mentioned that language itself seems fractured in their work.
The breakdown of language that connects to another recurring image these sources mention, Nebel, the fog.
Yes. Analyzing tracks like Firebend, the sources describe this fog just creeping in, thick, swallowing everything. It's such a potent metaphor for uncertainty, confusion taking over, being lost both literally like you can't see, but also figuratively when you can't think clearly or connect.
And the Schleif, the loop idea. That feels incredibly relatable, doesn't it? First, it's the endless zombie march, this repetitive decay.
But then sources like Crew Lore connected to that very human feeling of just being stuck. The repetition of a dead-end job or a bad relationship or even just negative thoughts you can't shake.
There was that one line mentioned, cutting the loop while being funky between life and death. That really captures it, doesn't it? Being trapped in that repetition, that sort of limbo.
But still hinting at maybe some resistance or just this weird, defiant energy, even when you're stuck. Finding a way to groove, even when facing like existential dread.
They really push boundaries with language, too, not just themes, the way they say things. An analysis of Ewiger Streifzug called their style sharp, poetic, even with grim subjects. It gave that example, Seelenstein lese im Chaos verloren. Soul screaming softly, lost in the chaos. That's foul.
Yeah, they invent words, right? Create these dense, layered lyrics, use tons of wordplay. Sources like Katzengold, Ewiger Streifzug, Klang der Nacht all highlight this. It feels like a deliberate attempt to break free from normal language, forge new meanings.
Like creating their own Doza crew dialect, as a couple of sources put it, something that maybe only fully makes sense inside their world.
Yeah, and honestly, looking at some of the lyrics and the analyses, it can feel overwhelming. Sometimes almost like nonsense.
But sources like Katzengold and the kaleidoskopy analysis suggest that's kind of the point. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It challenges you, the listener, to actively dig for meaning in that density, in the fragments. It actually requires work from you.
It turns listening into almost an act of investigation itself. And the sound design is a huge part of that. Sources like Crew Lore and Ewiger Streifzug mention their use of, like, primal noises, unsettling textures that just add to the unease, like those scratching sounds in Schattenwesen.
And the Klang der Nacht analysis talked about those unusual sounds or non-words like IU or Z, not as language really, but as, what do you call them, supercharged onomatopoeia.
Right. Sounds meant to capture a feeling, a vibe, an emotional state more than a literal message.
And the repetition of sound, that becomes a tool too, almost like a mantra, the source said, or a strobe light.
Yeah, like it pulls you in, maybe disorients you, but also captivates you, sucks you deeper into their world.
They also have these really specific sonic signatures, don't they? The sources keep mentioning this distinct O call.
Ah, yes, the O call. Analyses like Katzengold and the Klangnog breakdown show how they use it differently. Sometimes it's energetic, sometimes it sounds almost mournful, but it's like their sonic fingerprint. You hear that, oh, you know it's them.
And to really peek behind the curtain, those Doza Project's leak sources are fascinating. You see these raw sketches, experimental sounds.
Utterly unconventional noises they were playing with.
This is where you get the whoopee cushes, the baby cries, the sheep farts.
Sheep farts. It just shows this incredible willingness to embrace the unconventional, the absurd, the genuinely ridiculous. It's not all doom and gloom.
No, they definitely play with expectations, shifting between these really eerie dystopian soundscapes and then moments of just pure whimsy or almost calculated nonsense.
But even in that chaos, Those Doza projects, Sources and Cats and Gold, mention recurring things, right? Like the word scab popping up or that specific long I sound.
Yeah, like breadcrumbs, one source called them. Little hints of structure or connection hidden in the experimental noise.
And this whole experimental approach deliberately blurs lines too, as noted across several sources. You see music presented not just as songs, but as raw materials, instructions even.
Like those voiceover-only lyrics or musical notes mixed with random phrases like Mirko stinks.
Right. It challenges that whole idea of a finished product versus the creative process. It really invites you, the listener, to think about how songs are even built, how meaning gets constructed in the first place.
It totally pulls back the curtain, but in a way that's just as disorienting as the music itself.
Yeah.
So if we try to sum up their overall style based on all this, it's this intense aggression mixed with surprising vulnerability and often dark humor.
Yeah, and it fundamentally challenges traditional ideas about music, about art. It fully embraces postmodernism, fragmentation, and, crucially, it demands active participation from you.
They aren't making background music.
Not at all. They're building worlds, puzzles, experiences that require you to lean in, pay close attention, and actively piece together the meaning from the fragments they give you.
Okay, so we've established their music is this incredibly unique, genre-smashing, thematically dense, and deliberately unsettling thing that demands your engagement. But the sources suggest it's not just about atmosphere and themes. There are hints of actual narratives, right? Though often fragmented or open-ended.
Yes, exactly. And deliberately left open for interpretation, as sources like Cats and Gold and the GRD analysis highlight. They give you pieces, not the whole story neatly tied up.
The most detailed story seems to be what's called the hyper-universal story, found in their lyrics, other writings, and specifically laid out in that hyper-universal revisit source.
Right. This describes a really grim dystopian world ruled by this tyrant, Count Paste. It's a universe where you see familiar global problems, plagues, wars, but mixed with these fantastical elements.
And the central plot point is humanity's last desperate hope, a mission to save a dying sun.
And the crew sent to do this, well, they are spectacularly unqualified, maybe, or unconventional, let's say. The crew lore and hyper-universal revisit sources introduce them.
There's Florian, the pilot, described as virile spaced out on drugs. Karina, the weapons expert, who's confused but somehow likable, also hallucinating from drug use. And Christian, the cybernetic tech guy who's zoo-dicked slang for high, apparently, but still comes across as cool.
A truly unlikely bunch of heroes, operating under, extreme conditions. The sources detail their first meeting with Count Paste, highlighting his cruelty, his dismissiveness. It really underlines how impossible their mission seems.
And the mission itself is insane. Deliver a bomb to the sun. The source mentioned that phrase, stern and brand tan in hand.
Yeah, roughly star and fire barrel in hand. It just drives home the scale of the danger, the absolute absurdity of carrying something that could destabilize a star.
And tragically, predictably perhaps, according to crew lore and hyper-universal revisit, the mission fails. Spectacularly.
It does, and it's pinned directly on Florian being too high. He messes up programming the bomb. Instead of saving the sun, they accidentally, they nuke it.
Making everything infinitely worse.
The sources mention lunatic and tyranninand in connection with this mistake, almost like framing it as this act born of madness and desperation that leads to this unintended catastrophic tyranny over reality itself.
So their failure causes the very destruction they were trying to stop. But then, the twist. According to crew lore and hyper-universal revisit, this catastrophe creates a wormhole.
Leading to a parallel dimension. And this is where a document like the NVCRW logbook, #001, seems to pick things up. This new reality, Regulus 5, is initially described as like a perfect utopia.
Even Count Paste is benevolent there, according to Hyper-Universal Revisit, which is just bizarre.
Totally bizarre. And adding to the paradox, the crew, they aren't blamed for destroying their old world. Instead, they're somehow hailed as heroes for defeating some villain named Zazar.
Who we haven't heard of anywhere else.
Exactly. So Hyper-Universal Revisit stresses that they're celebrated for a victory they didn't actually achieve. They're living this fundamental lie in what looks like paradise.
And it gets even more complicated. In Regulus 5, Florian reunites with someone called Luna. Again, someone new to the story.
Right, not mentioned before. But here, according to crew lore and Hyper-Universal Revisit, she loves him deeply. Seems perfect, right?
Seems too perfect. Because this is where the contradiction really hits hard. Alongside these descriptions of utopia, there's what looks like a desperate secret message from another group, the Nova Crew.
Ah, yes, the Nova Crew warning. Crew lore says this message is basically Regulus 5 is a trap. Everything is an illusion. And specifically, Luna isn't trustworthy.
And chillingly, the message mentions the mainframe again and someone named Kyram.
That direct contradiction, Regulus 5 is utopia versus Regulus 5 is a trap, that's the core mystery here. The Nova Crew message itself sounds fragmented, panicked. Crew lore mentions hearing shouts and this repeating phrase, mainframe life, Kyram doza odo wa mainframe.
That repetition of mainframe, it feels really ominous. And Damon Kyram, identified elsewhere as a Doza Crew collaborator, him showing up in that warning, that feels huge.
Crew lore definitely flags that as a potentially massive link.
Crew lore also connects Damon Kyram to someone named Mike from Mike's Waffen Facts, another one of those cryptic references that suggests these threads might be crossing in ways that aren't immediately obvious.
Which brings us to the central puzzle these narratives pose. How do Doza Crew's recurring themes, digital rebellion, dystopia, loops, connect to Count Paste's ruined world, or this paradoxical Regulus 5, or the Nova Crew's warning?
Is Doza Crew's music just commentary about these worlds, or is it somehow describing events happening within them? Is the mainframe they sing about the same one the Nova Crew is warning about?
The theme of illusion is just so strong, isn't it?
Yeah.
Regulus 5 might be fake. Luna might not be trustworthy. As Crew lore points out, don't trust what you see feels like a running theme.
The mainframe especially, it starts to feel like it could be something much bigger than just a song concept. Maybe a controlling entity spanning realities. A digital prison. A master controller.
Crew lore asks those exact questions, highlighting the huge unsettling possibilities.
And Kyram, Damon Kyram, is he the key? The link between Doza Crew and whatever happened to Nova Crew, his name popping up in that desperate warning feels absolutely pivotal.
Did the Nova Crew get trapped in the mainframe? Was Kyram involved somehow? The sources just leave us hanging with so many questions about the true nature of Regulus 5, the mainframe's purpose, Kyram's role, and how Doza Crew's music fits into it all. Are they chroniclers? Victims? Rebels?
It really makes you want to go back and re-listen to everything, but with this narrative context in mind, looking for clues hidden not just in lyrics, but maybe in the sound design, the structure, maybe even subtleties in the German language itself. Feels like there are layers we totally miss without these other documents. And just when you think you're maybe starting to get a handle on the music, the themes, these fragmented stories, the sources take another sharp turn. They suddenly introduce elements that seem to connect to, like real people or documented events, which blurs the lines between the art and potential reality even further.
This is where the collection gets particularly unsettling, I think. That suggestion that the abstract worlds or fictional characters might actually intersect with things that have been documented, maybe investigated. It creates this profound sense of unease about what exactly we're even looking at.
The Miro thread is a perfect example. Pulling from sources like the MDO Summerfest analysis and the Maldite Koila discussion, we find multiple documents focused on this person named Miro.
Right. There's the song Doza Crew MDO, something described as an official report, another Doza Crew document, and then this really striking new piece, the Neuer Nachricht, which is a written message.
And Miro's portrayed really ambiguously across these. The MDO Summerfest analysis describes him as struggling, clumsy, often humiliated, even called the chief victim.
But at the same time, he's the target of incredibly harsh jokes and ridicule, especially at an event, the Summerfest, which is supposedly organized to support him.
The MDO song itself is such a strange piece of this puzzle. The analysis points out how it mixes lyrics that actively put Miro down, highlighting his stumbling, his awkwardness, with these completely unexpected choral parts cheering him on, like, "Oh, Miro, stand up, be strong."
It leaves you wondering, as the analysis asks, what's Doza Crew's actual intention here? Is it satire? Or is it just cruel? Are they mocking him for entertainment or subtly tearing him down while pretending to portray him?
The description of the Summerfest event in that analysis is particularly grim. It mentions how initial audience sympathy seems to curdle into mockery.
And the official report about it sounds chilling. Described as meticulously detailed, documenting everything, but written in this strikingly detached language. It apparently notes Miro crying, but with zero empathy from the writer.
Which really underlines the disturbing ambiguity around the support Miro is getting. Doza Crew's lyrics are questionable. The Summerfest organizers might be exploiting his victimhood.
As the analysis suggests, yeah. And that final line in the Summerfest song, "You are not alone," written in this context, it feels incredibly heavy, deeply ambiguous. Is it solidarity? Or is it manipulation? Like, you're not alone in your victimhood, or you're not alone with your exploiters.
The analysis concludes he kind of becomes this character in a story written by others, constantly surrounded, observed, maybe mocked, but never truly seen.
And the connection to the Malsite-Cool track just adds another disturbing layer. That track, as our earlier look at it noted, uses these distorted, repetitive loops of what sounded like a totally ordinary voice memo.
Right, back then we just thought it sounded like someone tired after work, maybe missing someone called Sass, just mundane.
But then you find the Neuer-Nachricht message,
Yeah.
and it provides this startling, really unsettling context. This message is aggressive, dismissive, uses these bizarre put-downs, Playmobil beard, water pistols.
It describes someone seen as a chronisch komische Phantomagana type, basically. A chronic, comical, phantom-like, pathetic individual, someone with alien delusions, and crucially considered gefährlich, dangerous. Oh, and the message adds a detail. This person has red hair.
And the connection revealed by linking these sources. The mundane, tired voice memo from Malzeit-Kula. It's allegedly from the same person being described so aggressively in the Neuer-Nachricht.
So the track's abstract unease, created by the distortion and loops, wasn't random. It accidentally, or maybe deliberately, mirrors the sender's anxiety and negative view of this person.
This whole Miro thread, especially with Malzeit-Kula, really highlights that unsettling gap between a fleeting digital trace, a casual voice memo, easily grabbed and reused, and the potentially messy, complex, maybe disturbing reality of someone's actual life.
It shows how personal stuff can be ripped out of context and repurposed into bizarre, abstract, or even cruel art. And as the Malzeit-Kula discussion notes, it raises huge questions about perception versus reality regarding the Bedrohung, the threat the sender feels, how much is real danger, how much is projection, or based on those alleged alien delusions. You're left totally unsure who, if anyone, is the real victim or threat here.
Then there's another deeply unsettling thread coming from the Pissinger sources. This involves some really disturbing audio material.
Yeah, full of aggressive language, explicit homophobic slurs, attacks on family members. The source notes how casual the hate sounds, which is chilling in itself.
And the slurs are clearly meant to dehumanize. They carry all that historical baggage, designed to reduce someone to just one stigmatized label, strip away their identity.
The repetition of certain hateful phrases, holin, shy, malal, du pisser, it feels calculated, doesn't it? Not just random anger.
Could be deliberate verbal assault, asserting dominance, or, as the analysis speculates, maybe it just reflects a very specific, limited vocabulary within a particular group or subculture, which is telling in its own way.
And the file names for this audio are weird, too. The Pissinger source mentions simple names like Franco 1.mp3 right next to things like Franco 111, followed by this long string of numbers. Looks less like a normal file name, more like code or timestamps, maybe?
The audio clips themselves offer zero context. As the source says, you listen and you have no idea, is it an argument, a hate crime, an interrogation, something else entirely. It's a puzzle with missing pieces.
But there are clues suggesting it might be part of an investigation. Pissinger points to those file name timestamps, saying their format implies specialized software, possibly law enforcement tech for logging evidence.
And there's that mention of Pizzi, potentially a misspelling of Polizei, German for police. These recordings could very well be evidence.
The Pissinger source then tries to connect this disturbing audio to the language found in those YouTube transcripts we talked about earlier, the Doza Crew ones.
Right, noting that those transcripts use a different kind of online language, heavily coded, lots of jargon, insider speak.
And this coded language, similar perhaps to the slang in the audio, could serve different purposes. Maybe group cohesion, like a digital handshake. Or, more ominously, maybe masking harmful activities from outsiders.
Pissinger tries to decode some phrases from the transcripts. Things like dominance, suggesting power struggles, and Kronenträger Untergang, Crown TRG downfall, hinting at rivalry.
There's also that recurring term visionary. The transcripts praise this figure who sees the future, guides others.
The source speculates this could point to, like, cult-like dynamics, a charismatic leader manipulating followers, which is something easily amplified online in closed communities.
And the really unsettling connection Pissinger suggests is, could these disturbing audio clips, the potential evidence, be linked to the coded language and themes of dominance, rivalry, visionary leaders found in those other online spaces, like the Doza Crew transcripts or related communities?
It raises the possibility that investigators might be monitoring these online spaces, trying to decipher the codes, find connections, maybe uncover evidence related to the kind of real-world actions suggested by the Pissinger audio.
It feels like two potential pieces, audio evidence and online chatter, of a much larger, deeply unsettling puzzle that stretches across digital spaces and potentially into real-world actions.
Okay, so this is where we try to pull all these different fragmented, often really unsettling threads together. We've got Dozakru's boundary-smashing music, the fragmented dystopian narratives, the unsettling characters and worlds, and these jarring hints of connections to real people, digital conflicts, potential investigations. The constant theme, the thing that weaves through all of it, the music, the stories, the real-world echoes, is this pervasive blurring of boundaries. It's noted in pretty much every source we looked at.
Yeah, the line between art and reality, digital and physical, creator and audience, sanity and delusion, truth and illusion, it feels constantly shaky, uncertain.
Doza Crew challenges expectations on every level. Musically, lyrically, narratively, conceptually, sources like Cats and Gold, the Doza Project's leak, they make that crystal clear. They don't play by the rules, and they certainly don't give you easy answers.
No, they hand you these fragments, a lyric, a weird sound, a character sketch, a mysterious document, and they basically demand that you, the listener, participate in making sense of it. You have to piece together the meaning yourself.
It turns the audience into a co-creator almost, or definitely an investigator, as some analyses noted.
And the themes of power, control, manipulation, the slippery nature of truth, they're absolutely central, aren't they? They pop up everywhere.
In the political satire of the narratives, the psychological struggles, the way figures like Miro were treated, the dynamics of those coded online spaces, the potential interactions suggested by the Kissinger audio, it resonates through everything.
The exploration of the digital landscape feels really significant too. You've got digital rebellion against the mainframe, digital prisons, digital navigators like the Clubman.
But also the permanence of digital footprints, how online anonymity can fuel aggression, the creation of echo chambers with coded language, and how these digital spaces might become arenas for real conflict or investigation.
Taken all together, these sources kind of force us as listeners to confront some uncomfortable stuff about society, maybe about ourselves, how easily vulnerability can be exploited, how perception can be manipulated, or just wildly different from reality.
And the potential for darkness that exists in people, and how it can get amplified online.
So ultimately, this whole deep dive is really about navigating ambiguity, isn't it? Questioning assumptions about what's real versus art, what's genuine versus manipulation, and just wrestling with how hard it is to find clear answers in a world that feels so fragmented.
It asks you, the listener, to sit with that discomfort and actively engage in the interpretation yourself.
So we've taken a deep dive into this really complex, multi-layered, and yeah, often unsettling web of sources connected to Dozakru.
We've explored their unique, boundary-pushing art, that aggressive genre blend, the dissonant alien sound, paired with those incredibly dark, metaphorical lyrics that somehow still carry this paradoxical energy.
We've dug into fragmented narratives, dystopian worlds, failed heroes, parallel realities that might be traps, mysterious figures like the Clubman, the mainframe, and the possibly crucial Kairum.
And we uncovered those unsettling connections to what might be real-world individuals like Miro, explored the deep ambiguity around how he's portrayed, and grappled with disturbing audio and coded online language hinting at digital conflicts, maybe even real investigations.
Throughout it all, the lines felt constantly blurred, didn't they? Between the music, the story, the digital identity, potential reality, challenging us to piece meaning together from fragments and question what we were even looking at.
We've definitely wrestled with themes of power, control, manipulation, the nature of perception itself, and the sometimes very dark reflections we see in digital spaces and how they echo in the real world.
This journey through the sources, it leaves us with so much to think about long after we stop talking. Like, how do we, in our own lives, navigate a world where reality feels increasingly fragmented, maybe even deliberately manipulated sometimes?
Where do the boundaries between our own creative expression, our digital selves, and our real lives actually meet? And how can those intersections be both incredibly creative but also potentially unsettling or even dangerous?
Here's a final thought to leave you with. In a world just saturated with information where our digital footprints seem permanent and can be easily taken out of context, how much of what you perceive as objective reality is actually verifiable fact?
And how much is shaped by the narratives you're given? Or the narratives you choose to believe? Or the narratives you create about others? Or maybe, just maybe, by deliberate illusions constructed around you?
Keep listening, keep exploring, and keep questioning the reality presented to you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.